So it's week 10 of our Intro to Web Programming course with PHP. As I think I kind of mentioned last week, we're sort of a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good. So some of the stuff we were going to cover today was things originally I had figured we weren't going to get to until next week. We'll see how the pace of today's class goes. I'm not sure that the things we want to accomplish are necessarily going to take our full 3-hour block. So in which case we will have a couple of options. One option is we can have a short class today. Another option is we could actually start on and do some of next week's lesson. We could actually start and do some of it a little bit this week and then carry on next week, which gives us, because we still got, after today, we still have 3 more classes, and then our 14th class is the final exam. And I'm kind of thinking of maybe doing something different over the last couple of weeks if we have time. I was talking to a former student not long ago, and we were talking about this class, and he was giving me some feedback saying, you know, PHP was a good language to start learning web stuff, but one thing I really didn't like about it is how unstructured it is compared to something like Java or C# that you all have used in your fundamentals course. So there are, I mean, we're sort of learning traditional PHP, but there are some existing PHP frameworks that allow us to work with PHP in a much more kind of structured way. So if we have time, what I might like to do in weeks 12 and 13 is build out a PHP application using one of those frameworks where it will give our application a lot more structure. It'll also be a good introduction to the kinds of things you'll be doing in the fall, probably with me, where we're doing ASP.NET and C#, and that's regardless of whether you're in Programmer Stream or you're in Web Stream. The Web Stream will be doing that in the fall. So we'll kind of see how our next couple lessons go. So what we'll do today, and we'll jump into in a couple minutes. I want to cover off one thing first. Is we're going to take our the site we've been building and our little albums music library. We're going to want to make it searchable and sortable, so a user can sort either by album title or by year, for example, A to Z or Z to A. Then we also want to make it so a user could search, put in a keyword and search maybe based on the artist or based on the album title. So we're going to add that functionality as well. Just before we do today, I want to spend a few minutes talking about, well, talking about that little green guy right there that we see when I'm logged in. So I'm in Blackboard and I see that. If I visit some other websites, I may or may not see that. Let's see if we go, say, here and read the newspaper. We might see that, we might not. So what is that little green lock? When I go here to the Globe and Mail site, we don't see it. On Blackboard, our browser's displaying this little icon. What's that all about? How come Blackboard has that icon? If I visit, say, the Globe and Mail site, we don't see it. What's that an indicator of? Okay, so it has to do with security. You're right. So it's telling us, our browser's telling us that Blackboard is a secure site and Globe and Mail, at least this part of the site, is not. Now, how's that security done on Blackboard? How does our browser know to consider this secure? Part of the clue is also look at the URL beside it, right? There's the URL on Blackboard. Look at the URL when we go to a public site. So Brenda, what do you think?
Because there is a specific user, and for a specific username, it's I don't know how to express it.
Okay, so you're saying because I'm authenticated,
yeah,
maybe it knows. Okay, well, that's a good guess. Well, let's see. What if I log out, though? It's actually still here. So now I'm anonymous on both sites. So that's a good guess. Not quite the answer. Look at the start of the URLs here. What's different about them? Okay. The prefix, what protocol is being used to load this site? On this one, is it HTTP? This one's just HTTP. This one's HTTPS. What's the difference? What does that S mean?
That is more secure.
Okay, yeah, it is. So when we've got HTTPS, that's part of how do we secure it? If we're going to build a site for somebody and there's going to be some kind of sensitive information, like maybe a login screen, like you're building an assignment 2, maybe we're taking credit cards. How do we secure a site so that it runs with HTTPS, and how do we get that green lock? Okay, that's right. So the connections, normally all of the traffic between any user's device and a website, that traffic is sent in plain text, right? So from your internet provider to that server, if I enter username and password, it goes as plain text to the Blackboard server, and Blackboard will send a response. That means any hacker along the way who intercepts that traffic, well, they can read my username and password. So how's that encryption done, Ernest? How do we get it so that rather than that traffic going in plain text, it'll be encrypted?
First, we have to configure our web server to use encryption, and also we have to get a certificate.
That's the big one. Thank you. So the way this is done, and this is something that if any of you ever build a website, you will have to do in all likelihood, back in, is we're going to have to obtain an SSL certificate. Anybody know what SSL stands for? What that acronym means? SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer. And as Ernest said, what it does is it encrypts all of our HTTP, all the content of our requests and all the content of the server's HTTP responses. So if we're going to build a site that needs to be secure, and pretty much any site, as long as there's a username and password on it, we're probably going to need it to be secure. We're going to have to buy an SSL certificate and register it to the domain of that website. Okay, so that's what this little green lock indicates. So when I click it, it tells me it's secure, and it shows me what company issued the encryption certificate, and we can actually view it. So it says what the domain name is. So if you build 5 different websites on 5 different domains and they all need to be secure, you need to buy an SSL certificate for each one of them. And you register the certificate to that domain so it encrypts the traffic. So it will tell us, and typically you can buy them from anywhere from 1 to 5 years. So if you buy one of these for a year for a website you're building or managing, you're going to have to renew it every year. Otherwise, the certificate will expire. Browsers will show messages saying the certificate's expired, the site's not secure, and basically will scare users away. That's what happens if you have an invalid certificate on a domain that people go to. The browsers put up these great big warnings, and they don't even show the website. So you want to make sure you never let these, you renew them before they expire. So there's a bit of a process. There's 2 different ways you can get a certificate. Now, there are a number of issuers out there. Does anybody know of any company you could use to buy a certificate from if you needed to get one? Okay. What do you suppose one of these costs for a year? So if I was going to register richfreeman.ca and I had a secure part and I wanted an SSL certificate, what do you suppose here, if we went into web security, anybody have a guess what GoDaddy might charge per year? Well, let's see. Now, there's different levels. If I wanted sort of a basic one, so that's what it would cost per year. Now, for the basic one, though, what this means is I would have to register it on, say, www.richfreeman.ca. These wildcard ones would allow me to have subdomains. So I could have like a shop.richfreeman.ca. It could use the same certificate. And we can see that's what Blackboard's does. When I clicked it and we looked at it, notice the certificate is registered to star.blackboard.com. So even though it runs for Georgian College under gc.blackboard.com, they can use that same certificate for anything else.blackboard.com. But they had to buy one of these wildcard certificates. So anything.blackboard.com. So those are more expensive. And they come in with different levels of encryption. So roughly that's what you're spending. When these first came out, I don't know, the first time I bought an SSL certificate, the cheapest one I could find was $300. So the price has dropped a lot. Now GoDaddy's used to be cheap, they're more expensive. I'll show you where you can get a couple of less expensive ones. Probably the cheapest place to get them, actually thanks to Ross. Ross found this and told me about it. These guys have very cheap SSL certificates. We go to and have a look and see what they offer. So their cheap one is $12 a year, so a lot less expensive. But you can see there's different levels. So you have to talk about with your client. I mean, you're not going to pay for it. Your customer is going to pay for this. But you might want to talk to them about the different levels and see what they're willing to spend. Okay, so this is, so it says, you know, for a personal website, a single domain, one of these might be appropriate. Also, you get a free SSL certificate for a year with your GitHub student pack. So on here, and most of you, I think you've signed up for it, right? You've got private repositories free with GitHub. So in here, I think they also give you a free SSL certificate for 1 year on one of your sites. Yeah, so through Namecheap, not only will they give you a domain for 1 year, but they'll give you an SSL certificate. They'll save you $9 for a year. So there is a bit of a process. There's two ways you can set one of these up. One way you can do it is most hosting companies will also sell you an SSL certificate. So that's the easiest way. I'm going to host my website. I find a hosting company. Generally, I can go to the hosting company and say, can you buy, I want to buy an SSL certificate, and we can't install it ourselves. Someone who has administrative access to the web server has to install it. Usually we have to talk to the hosting company and buy it from them and install it. So that's the easy way, but the hosting companies won't typically sell them for this cheap. The hosts I deal with will typically charge $75 or $80 a year for a 1 year certificate. So it costs more. If you go the cheap way, here's what you have to do. I'm going to show you the process. Let's say I know this is my own site, I'm building it, so I want to get the cheapest. I want SSL, but I don't want to spend a lot of money. I want to get one of these $12 certificates. So here's the process. Here's what has to happen. The first thing we need to do is we need to talk to our hosting company. I can show you some examples. I look at some old support tickets. Probably find some old ones. Closed. Here. So I needed an SSL certificate for my customer. So the first thing is the web server, the web hosting company has to create a certificate request for your specific domain name on their server. And in order to do that, they need all of this information about the company that owns it. So I provided that information about my client, and then they generate what's called a certificate request. So I have to take this code, go to Namecheap, and when I buy my certificate here, part of that before they issue the certificate is I have to copy and paste that certificate request from the server. So that gets included in the certificate that I buy. It might take an hour or two. They'll send me an email and they'll say, here's your certificate. It's ready for download. Click here. and it'll give me a link where I download the certificate. So then those are physical files you download, and now you have them, but you have to put them up on the web server and have your hosting company install them. So they would look something like this. So here was a certificate. So it was basically a code generated by the certificate issuer using that request. So then I had to put this file on the web server and tell the server administrators, okay, I've uploaded the certificates online now. You need to install them to get the SSL running properly. So this whole process took a little while. Let's see, it finished on February 3rd at 11 a.m. When did I file the ticket? So they sent me this and I didn't reply for a little bit. So it took probably a day or so. It took a day between the time I started the request and the time their SSL was running. So it will take more than 5 minutes. So if you want an SSL certificate, you need to do it at plan. It will take a few hours or a day or two to get it up and running and installed. And then every year, I'd have to go and renew my certificate and go through the same process again every year. Get a new certificate request, buy another certificate, download it, put it on the web server, and ask the host to install it. Or I could pay 4 times the money and just buy it straight from the host. Then I just say, I want a certificate, here's the domain, they do everything. So this will be your responsibility as a developer. Your customer, your client, they're not going to know anything about how to do this at all. So whenever we're building a site, unless our site is just all public information, just basically HTML and CSS only, then those would probably be the only sites we don't need an SSL certificate on, right? Even on Globe and Mail, here it's public, but what do you expect as soon as I go to, well, here, actually, let me open it go to their homepage in a new window. I'm already logged in here as well. So as soon as I go to login, interesting, right? Look at what my browsers, look at what Firefox is telling me. I clicked login here. It's telling me, look, there's a login page here. It's not secure. There's actually no SSL, so your login is not encrypted, and it's warning me. Logins here could be compromised because there's no SSL on that page. It's not great. They should probably fix that. They should force it. So here, when I go to register, same thing. Interesting. Let's go to Google for a second. See, on Google now, everything's encrypted. Even if I take out the HTTPS, put it back. So this is one of the other tricks. Not only do we need to buy the certificate, but we also need a script in our header. If our pages need to be secure, we need to check if the URL has HTTPS. Because if the URL doesn't have HTTPS, it means the user is not encrypting their traffic. They're sending and receiving plain text traffic. So we have an SSL, but the user's basically gone around it and they're not using it. So we should be checking, if we want to force the user to use our certificate, we should be checking if the URL starts with HTTPS. And if it doesn't, we want to redirect the user to the same page, but include the S.
I have a question. I have a website for you to open. I have a question.
Sure.
It's A numeric 2.
Yep.
Z digital. CO.
CO?
Yes. This is insecure now. Like this is not.
Okay, which is fine because this is a public page.
Yeah. So if we go to make a payment, like it's in navigation bar upside.
Okay. Now also now this is just a contact form, so probably SSL for a contact form is not necessary, I suppose. But
Navigation bar.
Yep.
Yeah, make a payment. Now it's
Right. Look at the URL, HTTPS.
yeah. So my question is like, can we put in a particular page, or we need to go for a like whole website?
What you typically do, you can do either. Okay. So typically you install the certificate, it's installed on the entire domain, but whether you force it, so here if I take out the S, let's see whether it forces me back. So that's a problem, right? And notice on Google, when I took out the S, it redirected me. Same if you try it on Blackboard. If you're logged into Blackboard, try and take out the S on any page. It's going to check and redirect you. It's not going to let you around it. So this site, yeah, they need that. But it's up to you as the developer what pages. So you could just write a little HTTPS script, right? In fact, you might even do it in your auth.php or any page. You could put it in there, just put in a script and require it only on the pages that need to be secure.
So this is not secure.
It's not secure. So this really isn't safe because someone's putting in their credit card number. That credit card number is being passed in plain text over the internet. It's not encrypted. It's, you know, so to show you a different example of where I've used it. So on most of the public pages here, I don't need it, right? These are public, built this site a while ago. But on the register page, we're forcing HTTPS because we're going to ask the user for personal information. So if you take the S out here, it redirects back. So there's a script checking. So it's not enough to buy and install the certificate. You need to figure out which pages or which sections of the site need that certificate, and you have to have a check that your certificate gets used. So this is part of, I mean, we've done a fair bit from a PHP coding perspective about how do we secure and protect the website? How do we do our due diligence? By doing things like hashing passwords. But this would also be part of what we should be doing. So really any website where you build where there's a login, you need an SSL certificate realistically. Right? If it's important enough that you can't let anybody see it, then you probably should be encrypting those pages as well as your sign up and login. All right. And if anyone from the Globe and Mail is watching, well, you need to fix that on your site too. Okay, so I'm going to grab my code from last week. I'm going to grab my lesson 9 music library, copy it into lesson 10. And I'm going to upload it to the web server. To upload it to the web server. So my album is showing up, my images haven't uploaded yet. And then I'm going to open up my PHP Storm. Oh, and I forgot to copy my covers folder because I don't have that locally. So let's download that.